let's move into something I'm much more excited about. Dark Souls 3, the Ringed City, final piece of DLC, final thing from FromSoft for Dark Souls. And I think to begin at the end, this is a very fitting final chapter for the Souls games. And in light of Bloodborne, but more specifically Neo, having so recently came out, it is time to let it go. It is time to just like, give it the Viking funeral, send it off, and fondly remember these the Demon Souls, 4 games and all their DLC, and enjoy it. And as it is, I think it's reached what it can be. We've seen all the things we can see with it. Let's move and stretch the Souls formula into new areas, such as Bloodborne, such as Neo. Those areas much more interesting, and I think have room to grow into something maybe potentially better. Evolve the formula, because I'm not saying the Ringed City was stale. I think the best way to describe the Ringed City is it is the best DLC at certain times, and it is the worst DLC at certain times. It combines all these elements. Like the first hour of it, me dying, is so awesome. It has these moments that I should have seen coming, and these things are like traps that I kept falling into, and I was like, what the fuck's going on? Like this is incredible. It's playing with me in ways that I've wanted a Souls game to do for a while now, for years, and that's incredible. And then it's also like, a quasi stealth at certain points. I'm like, this is okay, but I don't really know what you're telling me to. I do what? Like that's not. And then like as soon as you get past this stealth element right here, well, not right here, there's several of those. As soon as you get past these weird angels and do the boss and go a little further, there's another weird thing that you have to sneak and hide behind cover from another set of arrows. It's just very strange that it kept happening throughout the DLC. And the further I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, because the beginning of it is not, in terms of gameplay, the best. I think the enemies, the setups, the bosses, like once you get to the first boss, then it really gets into it. As cool as the setting for the very beginning is, it's not right. Like it doesn't fit right. Why? I just don't. I know I was probably a little underleveled for this with the character I had, but I don't understand why these enemies were so brutal. I'm in basically not full Havel set, but a lot of Havel stuff going on. And these guys just will wreck you. But then you move to the next area, and the enemies are like, nah, we don't do that much damage. I'm like, I don't understand the difference between your sword and the next guy's sword. I don't understand the strategy of fighting 2 quick knights. And then you present me with one slow-moving big guy and think those are equal. Like, they weren't equal at all. So I think it just has these very strange... Like, it's just not balanced in a way that feels right to me. And this is a problem I've had with, quite honestly, every single piece of DLC for Dark Souls, except for the one in the first game, which I thought worked the best as a cohesive part of that game in terms of difficulty and when you can play it. The problem with the Dark Souls 2 DLC and the Dark Souls 3 DLC is that it doesn't fit in the universe. It's like, oh, you want to go somewhere else and do another thing? Go over here. You can access it whenever, but you can't, but you kind of can. Oh, you got to beat the whole game, but we're not going to make it fit. Like, the thing that works so well with Souls is that each part of it is more or less in an order, right? It's not linear. You can do things in Dark Souls 2 and 3 in, varying different ways, but it all ends up being in an order. And having this DLC is completely interruptive of the order that they've made the rest of the game around. So they never quite fit for me. You know, like I love these games. I got the platinum in Bloodborne. I bought Dark Souls 1 on PS3 and on PC. I bought Dark Souls 2 on PS3 because I didn't want to wait a month for the PC version, and I bought it again on PC. Like, I'm a big fan here. I've played all the DLC, but I've only ever beaten the first set of Dark Souls 2 DLC. Everything after that has had one boss or something that I couldn't get past, and I was like, I just don't care. I just don't care to play it. It doesn't feel right. I'm not doing enough damage, or it does crazy weird shit, or it's just not a fun fight. Like the reused boss in the second, I think it was the second, Dark Souls 2 DLC that's optional, the reused boss fights. Like, I don't care. Getting there is such a pain in the ass. Why? Who am I proving this to? That I have to play this game? So I feel like all of their DLC falls into that trap of like, why? There's no incentive to do this. There's no gameplay incentive to do this. Why would I even bother? And maybe that's even a different issue altogether than talking about this DLC. And it sucks because this DLC is great, but I hate how it keeps doing, like, the first boss starts off with you're fighting two things. And I hate the 2-on-1 fights. I don't summon people in. I will help other people, but I don't summon them into my own game. So it always means I'm getting flanked by these stupid dragon things, but that fight's not so bad. Then we get to the next official boss fight, not the optional one, which I don't like at all, because it would take like half an hour with my shitty sword, which is another issue. It doesn't matter. The second boss fight summons in someone else who's playing the game to fight you. That's not the problem with this fight, though. Like, I'm fine with that. I was fine with that in Demon Souls. It did a similar thing. Dark Souls 2 had one that did that as well. The Mirror Knight? What was his name? Lightning Man Knight? Yeah, sure. Let's call him that. There was lightning in the room. But the problem with this is there's another dude in the room just like throwing knives at you. And the guy who's summoned in gets other things that target you. And so everything is just chip upon chip of this damage constantly. And it's infuriating. I can't stand that boss fight. I went offline, so I didn't have to worry about the randomness of other players. Not because I was tired of fighting other players. I would have gladly fought them and probably lost. But I was tired of losing to that other guy in the room that was just an NPC because he has so much HP. He's not even the boss, and he's just throwing fucking ninja stars at you the entire time, and he's super aggressive. And then if you wait too long, another one shows up, and it's like, fuck this fight. You had this really cool setup of me just fighting another player, and then you threw in a bunch of other nonsense. And that's what I mean when I say this is a great piece of DLC and a terrible piece of DLC, because it really hedges the line there. Right before that too is this really long gauntlet section of maybe like 20-30 enemies, and you could really not know where the next bonfire is, and you could almost completely miss it. And it's just so fucking long, but it's also a really cool gauntlet. But it's one of those things where once you've died at it a couple times, like, why am I fighting everything? Why? There's no reason to fight everything. It takes forever to get where I need to go. I'm just going to run by everyone. And as people who play Souls games will know, that's totally viable. You can just run straight through everything. If you know what you're doing and you know the path and where you need to go, yeah, just run through. Most things probably won't follow you all the way through. And since you're running just to get your souls back and just to kind of keep exploring, it's almost worth it. Like, I feel like that's so stupid. Like, that doesn't... I shouldn't... A viable strategy should never be running through it on my first attempt, on a not speed run, on a not doing weird shit run. Like, but that's how it feels. That area really feels like it needs a shortcut. It needs something else there, because fighting everything and going through this whole mystery maze isn't that it's like super difficult. It's that if you want to do it and not die and get whatever, you have to do it so slowly and so one-on-one. And there's so many guys in the way. It's just like, this is an awesome gauntlet you made that really needed a halfway mark. It really does. And I don't know. You could say, oh, you're not good, get good at the game, and whatever. Man, I did every level in Neo. I thought the game wasn't that hard at all. I'm good at these games, pretty decent. I think my build here is really shitty. That's not helping me. It also doesn't help that you go straight from Neo into Zelda, into Nier, into this, back to Souls. Like, it just doesn't, it's a weird, it took me a couple hours to get back into Souls, which is fine. But I don't understand, there's these moments of like one-on-one duels in a weird swamp area against a guy who looks like Ornstein with an armor that looks like that. And it was an awesome fight. It was just a really cool fight. But like, I don't know how you could make this awesome Dark Souls moment surrounded by moments of like, and Patches is here, and that's cool. And that area he's in where he finally does his little Patches thing is not interesting. And I don't know. There's this moment, fucking hair everywhere. There's this moment where it feels like a retread in a really good way of, oh, this is the area from Dark Souls 2. And you're like, oh, that's super cool. And like, oh, I like seeing this area kind of rethought out in a new way. But then there's kind of an area that looks like Dark Souls 1, but it kind of doesn't, but it isn't. Like, in a way that Dark Souls 3 proper felt like it was revisiting some areas and making them lesser. Specifically, I'll always bring up the lava fire area in Dark Souls 3 as trying to be like, hey, look, we got a lava area. And I'm like, hey, look, it's not as good, like nowhere near as good as Dark Souls 1. So I don't know why you're trying so hard. This DLC felt not like it was trying hard to be those other areas, because it succeeded in the first one. But then towards the end, it was like, why didn't you? Why didn't you just straight up go, this is 500 years before or after Dark Souls 1, set in the same place? And just move some things around. Like, why didn't you just do that? That's so much more interesting to me as a big fan than what you ended up doing as just like, here's new stuff that's not the same, but is the same. But is it the same? Like, I just don't care. And it also brings back to the point of, people love the lore and the storytelling, or the lack of storytelling, that's just environmental storytelling now, in this game and in the Souls games. And I like it too, but I'm not one to read all the little weapon shit. I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that. I think it's too vague for me to be like, if it was just a little less vague, I might look at it and think, okay, what is it? What's really going on here? But it's so vague, I just don't care. Really. Like, I care about the kind of overall story, but I just don't, like, I just don't care. It's this point, I'm like, is this the same universe as 1, but it's the future, but the ash is all here? I'm like, I just don't know. And the game, quite frankly, is not trying to make me know. So the basic surface level stuff is all I'm getting, and it's fine. You know, I'm sure there's some cool stuff. Like, there's some cool stuff at the end, because I did eventually get past that stupid boss. That's, you know, very indicative of, like, really cool Souls moments and things. But I can't help but feel like this game really needs just a smidge more story. Just a smidge. Not a lot. Just a little bit more. I think Dark Souls 2 kind of got that better. Or at least maybe Dark Souls 3 proper. Maybe Dark Souls 1. Maybe we've just been chasing Dark Souls 1 this entire time, and that's the best one. You know, maybe that's what this is. I think that could be what this is. I don't know. It's great and not great. And I think it's worth it to play it. And I think my build's terrible. I don't know how. I feel like I haven't had a fun build since Dark Souls 1. There's too many weapons. That was something Bloodborne did, which really made it interesting. Like, you can beat the game with your starter weapon, not because you're trying to be cool and beat the game with your starter weapon, but because it was viable. And like, they just, you know, here's 10 weapons in all of Bloodborne, and they're all good in their own different ways. And it's just choice. It's just how your preference, right? That's so much more interesting to me than, oh, here's 16 broken swords in my inventory. What am I going to do with this garbage? Like, no one's beating the game with the fucking broken sword. If you want a challenge, beat the game with just punches. Okay? I don't need a broken sword. I don't need all those shitty weapons that are just gumming up the works of the rest of it. And I also miss the upgrading. I really do think this is the best. And I kind of said this earlier, so I'll say it again. After Neo, after playing this DLC, I look back at Neo more fondly. I already really loved Neo, but I look at it more fondly because it broke conventions enough to be like, oh, you're adding. There's a lot additive to this experience that is better. It does things better, does things worse, but does things better too. And I think Souls can really take a moment, do Bloodborne 2, and then go in a completely different direction. Make a Armored Core, or whatever they always did. Make a different game altogether. Make a Zelda-like game. Make a Castlevania-like game where, it's more like Dark Souls 1, but it's maybe not as difficult, and it has the open world that you're exploring around. Like a third-person Metroid Prime is how I'll describe it, with the abilities and all that. Make a third-person shooter. Like, do whatever you want to do. I think they're done. Like, this really feels like they're done here. And I wish it was sad. Right? I wish it was a bummer moment of, oh, we're not getting in more Dark Souls. But after I played 3, I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done. And then the first DLC was fine and good. And I think this DLC is better than the first one. And this DLC is just like, okay, goodbye, Dark Souls. I love you. I've had enough. We can move on. This is the breakup at the restaurant that's very amicable, but I don't need you anymore. I still have my memories of you, and I still have Dark Souls 1 through 3 and Demon Souls. And the new hotness Bloodborne, which please God Bloodborne 2 is here, and I think that moves the formula more forward than this, which is such a retread. It felt so kind of old and just stale. But considering saying that, a stale Dark Souls is still better than like half the games that come out. So that's not that big of a negative. This is that boss fight, which I eventually did figure out. But I always feel like I have this shitty weapon. So I'm using this like stick. I feel like everyone else, like I'll help someone fight the boss, right? And they'll be fighting the boss. And they'll hit him for 500 damage. And I'm over here like 100. And they're just like 5. Like, Jesus, where do I get that weapon? Maybe I just don't understand. That's possible. But I don't know. I'm missing something. Clearly I'm missing something, which is fine. And this build is kind of fucked from the get-go. This build was made, it was a second playthrough to get ready for the first DLC. When I got to the first DLC, I was maybe a little under-leveled, but I didn't think the first DLC was very difficult until the latter half, and then it like spikes. I still never beat the final boss of that DLC, never beat the final boss of this DLC. I got very close and was like, nah, I'm done. I'm playing Nier, I'm playing Zelda, I'm playing Mass Effect. I'm not going to spend 6 hours or even 2 hours, even 1 hour. I did spend 1 hour. Another hour fighting this final boss, trying to beat it. Like I'm just not going to. If there was nothing else out right now, sure. But that is not the case. And it wasn't good enough. The fight was, again, because my shitty stick-ass weapon, I go from the first DLC to this one. I don't even remember what the hell's going on. I had to play through. That was the other thing too. I had to play through not the final boss of the game, but the 2 bosses before that and the areas accompanying them. I had to play through those areas to get to this DLC. I think that stuff, just as good, if not better, in almost every way than this DLC. The setting and some of the lore stuff is cooler in this, But as a game, on a gameplay level, level design level, bosses, the end of Dark Souls 3 is extremely strong. From Dancer to the end, extremely strong. And this is weaker. I feel like with the theme of fire in this game, we really need the survivor torch that just gets like, and it gets extinguished. That's how this needs to end. So yeah, I beat the first. You beat the first Dragon Man, and then you fight the second Dragon Man, which is actually not that crazy of a fight. It's a good fight. I think this fight's super good. That's the other thing too. Is not to bring up Bloodborne again, if my eye twitches. It's been twitching for a couple of days. I might be dying. Bloodborne and the Bloodborne DLC. That DLC, the Old Hunters, is better than any Souls DLC by a fucking mile. Like, it's not even close. So it's real tough to be like super jazzed about DLC. Like, that DLC was the benchmark for DLC in the Souls universe. And I think the first Dark Souls, that DLC, is the closest thing we've gotten. I also really like the first DLC content for Dark Souls 2, the little kind of Mayan temple area or whatever it is. I like that quite a bit. This is Dragon Man. He's my friend now. He doesn't really pay attention. I just hit him. You can kind of see the health bar. It's underneath my stupid graphics. Anyway, it's good. That dragon's mean. He punched. Also, he's not a dragon. I keep calling him a dragon. Not a dragon. Nope.